Hey everyone, in this video we are going to take a look at this algebra word problem. Before I get started, a lot of students have trouble figuring out how to take the word problem and know what kind of formula to use or how to set it up. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that. So the first thing I'm going to assume is that you are in a math class right now that is working on this type of thing. And so you either have lectures to attend or you have videos to watch, and you should have a textbook where that you're reading regularly, and homework and practice problems. So ideally, when you go into this kind of problem, you have some background, a little bit, and so you know, okay, well, this past week we are working on linear equations, so I'm probably going to be using that. Or this past week we were using inequalities, so I'm probably going to use that. So that's where you're going to want to start. Is building off of what you have most recently learned in class. So I'm also gonna bring up some equation solving tips that may save your life. Uh, will it actually save your life? I don't know, but they are helpful. So number one, be familiar with the rules. You need to know the order of operations, which is actually also on this page. I think. There it is. Order of operations. You can read more about that. I'm going to leave a link to this page in the video description. So you need to know the order of operations, basic mathematical properties, and how to use your calculator. Number two is read carefully. Know what you know and know what you don't, especially when solving a word problem like what we're doing here. Clarify for yourself what it is you have and what you're being asked to find. We'll go through that together for this particular problem. Number two, write clearly. It's ideal that you write everything down when you're working on a problem. You can, if you write too much or too messy, you can rewrite it later. But don't skimp writing things down. Write it down simply in your own words. Set aside space to list out variables in your problem. Make sure you are clear about what definitions you have. If you need any information, look it up and write that down. Color coding can help keep you on track. The next tip is practice. Practice, 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 practice so much. Practice, the word practice no longer feels like a real word. Can't even talk. Just practice a lot. Math is its own language, and it does take a lot of practice to get comfortable using the vocabulary, using the correct grammar. It's just like a language, so lots of practice. The next tip is show all your steps. Avoid skipping anything. Even if you're confident and you know what you're doing, which is great, you still want to try and keep writing things down, because in the future, after you've learned 16 new things, you might have maybe find it a little hard to remember the stuff that you're comfortable with now. And so you can look back at your notes and all of your steps will be there. So make sure you have that all there. And then last is double check. Make sure that you're following the correct steps. You haven't accidentally switched out any numbers, or like you haven't left out any signs. That's a common problem, is to forget to put a negative where it belongs. And if it's a word problem, you want to make sure that whatever answer you end up with makes sense in context. So we're going to use all of these tips to go ahead and solve the problem that we had on the screen. Here it is. So here's our problem. We're going to go through it together. A farmer has 160 yards of fencing material and wants to enclose 3 rectangular pens. Suppose that X represents the length of each pen and Y represents the width. The pens are next to each other. Oops, sorry. Pens are next to each other, and thus will share at least one length with an adjacent pen. The middle pen will share both of its lengths with the 2 adjacent pens. And we have 3 questions. A, assuming that the farmer uses all 160 yards of fencing, write an expression for Y in terms of X. B, write an expression in terms of X for the area of one individual pen. And C, if the farmer wants to design the structure so that each pen encloses 250 square yards, determine the dimensions of each pen. Okay, so first question. Assuming the farmer uses all 160 yards of fencing, write an expression for Y in terms of X. Now, I find it very helpful to visualize. when I'm working on a word problem. Draw a little doodle here or there. So I am working with a farmer here. Let's say I'm a contractor. I'm the one who's designing the pens here. And my farmer here wants 3 rectangular pens. Okay, 3 rectangular pens. And it does say that they're all next to each other. Yeah, so I got that down. And it says that we're dealing with length and width, right? Length and width. And it says x is length, and y is width. So x is length, which is the longer side. That's what length means. And the other side, the shorter side, must be width. So let's label that. The x's are all the longer sides, which would be these. And then y would be the widths, which would be those. And let's just double check and make sure this fits with what we have here. So the pens are next to each other, check, and thus will share at least one length. So they should share at least one x with an adjacent pen. It says the middle pen will share both of its lengths with the 2 adjacent pens. So the middle pen here, let's say this is a sheet pen. Okay, the sheet pen shares both of its lengths with the 2 adjacent pens. Let's say the 2 adjacent pens are pig pen and chicken pen. So, and it says that it also said where to go. The pens are next to each other and will share at least one length with an adjacent pen. The pig pen shares a length with the sheep pen. The sheep pen shares both lengths with chicken and pig. And then the chicken pen shares a length with the sheep pen. So it says each one shares at least one. Yes, that meets the criteria. So far, I think we have a pretty good visual of what this problem looks like. And this hopefully will help us to answer part A. So assuming the farmer uses all 160 yards of fencing, write an expression for y in terms of x. All right, well, let's just write down what we have first. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 x's, 4x, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6y. So 6y, where's my button? So I've got 4x, 6y, and altogether it's going to equal 160 yards. Okay? So this is what I have. They do say write an expression for y in terms of x. So they're basically saying solve for y. That's what this means. So if I'm going to solve for y, the first thing I'll do is I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. Okay? 4x minus 4x, the x's will cancel. And I can't do 160 minus 4x because they're unlike terms. So that's just going to bring me down to 6y equals 160 minus 4x. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to divide every single term by 6. So that's going to bring me down, dividing every single term by 6, will bring me down to y equals 160 over 6 minus 4x over 6. I can go ahead and simplify this a little bit because 160 and 6 can both be divided by 2. That's 80 over 3. And both 4 and 6 can also be divided by 2. Could be 2x over 3. And this probably looks a little bit gross written this way. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write it like you would normally see it with stacked fractions. So writing an expression for y in terms of x, we get 80 over 3 minus 2x over 3. Technically, you could write that as one big fraction if you wanted to. 80 minus 2x over 3. I'll probably do that later on. But for now, we're going to call part A good. That's it. So let's move on to part B. Write an expression in terms of x for the area of one pen. Well, first, let's just concentrate on what we understand about this because it might be confusing. In terms of x, what does that mean? But you know what area is, right? Area is length times width. Or in our case, it's x times y. So I could say the area is x times y. But when they say write it in terms of x, they mean they do not want to see any y's in there. They only want x's. So that means we have to find some other way to represent y. And luckily, We did that in part A. See, we have y equals 80 over 3 minus 2x over 3. So we can, instead of doing y times x, we can do, or x times y, I should say, we can do x times this expression. Let me show you. There. X, and instead of y, we have the 80 over 3 minus 2x over 3. Because we determined from part A, this was just another way to write y. Now you can take what I have here and you can take another step and you can distribute the x times 80 over 3, x times negative 2x over 3, and you can get this next set here, 80x over 3 minus 2x squared over 3. And like I said earlier, you can, because these two both have 3 as their denominator, you could squish the numerators together and make it into one fraction. That's totally fine. And then for the last step, I took one extra step. It's customary to have the higher exponent come first. So I took my negative 2x squared and I put it in front of my positive 80x. So when they say write an expression in terms of x for the area of one individual pen, this is what I end up with. I end up with negative 2x squared plus 80x all divided by 3. Let's move on to part C. If the farmer wants to design the structure so that each pen encloses 250 square yards, determine the dimensions of each pen. All right. So if the pen encloses 250 square yards, that means the area of the pen is 250 square yards, right? And we learned from part B that this right here, negative 2x squared plus 80x all divided by 3, this is the area. So this is going to have to equal 250 square yards. Okay, so we have that set up. Now we need to determine the dimensions of each pen. Even if you have no idea what to do, if you have an equation, solve it. That's almost always a good bet here. So I'm going to do my best to solve this equation. All right. Now it looks like a quadratic because I have an exponent of 2 here. Let's do a little bit of simplifying. I do not like that I have a big old fraction here. So what if we multiplied everything by 3? Multiplied every term by 3. On the left here, the 3's will cancel. And over here on the right, 3 times 250 is 750. So this is going to make it a little bit less hideous. And we're going to get negative 2x squared plus 80x equals 750. Now to put it into the standard form of a quadratic, it needs to be in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Equals 0 is the key. It has to equal 0. So in order for me to get this to equal 0, I'm going to want to subtract 750 from both sides, because 750 minus 750 is just 0, which is cool. And over here on the left side, this is an x squared term. This is an x term. I don't have any other constants, so I really can't do anything other than just slap that negative 750 or that minus 750 on there. But now I have it set up so it equals 0. So this is my standard form. So I'm going to use the quadratic formula for this. You can try factoring this if you'd like to. You can complete the square. There are multiple different ways you can solve this. I've just personally decided to use the quadratic formula, which is x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Remember, plus or minus means we're going to get 2 different answers, or at least 2 answers. They may not be different, but we're going to get 2 answers. So let's keep an eye on that. Let's look at our equation here and identify the a, the b, and the c, because we need all of those pieces. So a is the coefficient attached to my x squared term. B is the coefficient attached to my plain old x term. And then c is the coefficient, c is the constant. So a is negative 2, b is 80, and c is negative 750. Make sure you keep the signs when you're identifying a, b, and c in these parts here. So if I plug in my a, b, and c, into my quadratic equation, I'm going to get this. I'm going to get negative 80 plus or minus the square root of 80 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times negative 750 all divided by 2 times negative 2. I'm going to go ahead and off screen grab a calculator to simplify some of the stuff. I'm not doing any mental math with these numbers here. So go ahead and grab your calculator and follow along. Let's figure out what 80 squared is and what negative 4 times negative 2 times negative 50 is. All right, so if we calculate all that out, looks like we get 6,400 minus 6,000, okay? And then in the denominator, 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. If we simplify a little further, 6,400 minus 6,000 gets you 400. So we have negative 80 plus or minus the square root of 400 over negative 4. Simplify a little further. Again, I'm not doing this mental, I'm just off screen. I've got a calculator going. But the square root of 400 is 20, so we get negative 80 plus or minus 20 over negative 4. Once we get down to this point, we have to separate it into two different equations. So it's either negative 80, whoops, sorry, that's negative 8. Negative 80 plus 20. And then that gets divided by 4. So one possible answer is, negative 15. Or we could do negative, I'm sorry, I didn't divide by negative 4. Rewind. All right, negative 80 plus 20 divided by negative 4. There we go, positive 15. So positive 15 is one possible answer. All right, or we could do negative 80 minus 20 instead of plus. And then divide that by negative 4. 25. So our two possible answers are either 15 or 25. 15 or 25. Now, it may be tempting to stop here. Look at that, you solved it, great. But before you stop in a word problem, always go back and read the question to make sure you answered it. This says determine the dimensions of each pen. We have not done that yet. We have found two possibilities for x. And remember from our drawing up here, x is the length. So all of these could either be 15 or 25. Well, which is it? Let's figure that out. Let's go back to part A here. We know we have two possibilities for x. It can either be 25 or 15. Let's plug them each in and see what the corresponding y would be. Remember, x is the longer side, so x has to be bigger than y. So if I plug in one of my x's and I get a bigger y, I have to cut that out. Y cannot be bigger. Let me show you what I mean. Let's grab the calculator here. Let's try plugging in the 15 first, because that was the first one I found. So if I do 80 over 3 minus 2 times 15 over 3, I get 16 and a third. So if I plug in 15 for x, sorry, that's 16 and 2/3. If I plug in 15 for x, I get more than 16 for y. I cannot have a bigger y than x. So x cannot be this 15 right here. It doesn't work out. I need to get a smaller y. So it's not going to be the 15. Let's check and see if the 25 works. So if I do 80 divided by 3 minus 2 times 25 divided by 3, I get 10. That's going to work. 10 is less than 25. So each x could be worth 25 and each y could be worth 10, and that's going to work out. All the x's are bigger and the y's are smaller. That's how it works with length and width. So when they ask for the dimensions of a pen, it's going to have to be, x can't be 15 because that didn't work out. It's going to have to be x equals 25. And we found out that if x is 25, then y equals 10. So the dimensions are, let me write this out. Usually for these kinds of word problems, you want to write it out in full sentences. So dimensions are 25 yards by 10 yards is what we found out. That's what it has to be. And just to double check that, we already did kind of one double check, so I guess we're going to triple check it. Let's plug that in. Remember way back up here, we had 4x plus 6y equals 160. Well, if we decided that the x is 25 and y is 10, if we replace x with 25 and y with 10, does it balance out? Do we get 160? Let's try it. Replace the x with 25 and the y with 10. Will it equal 160? It does. So we have made sure we met all criteria. We made sure that x represented the longer side, the bigger number. We made sure that altogether we used 160 yards of fence and that the area of one of the pens is 250 square yards because 25 times 10 is 250. So I think we have solved everything. I will leave links in the description of this video to some more support resources for how to solve these kinds of equations, the order of operations, and you can also download this set of notes right here. This picture file will be available for you to download as well. And as always, I wish you all the best of luck.